Hello, and welcome back to the Battle Frontier podcast, where we aim to help you level up in your journey as a competitive Pokemon TCG player. I'm Aaron Curry. Here with me, as always, is my co host John Orgel. And this week, we're going to look at some of the results from the special event that happened over in Seville, Spain this past weekend, before we hit you with some trivia and Blaine's quiz show, and follow that up with kind of how the meta has developed and how we expect it to continue to develop heading into Milwaukee this coming weekend. But before we get into all of those Pokemon results, I need to know, John, what have you been up to this week?
So this week was pretty quiet. What did I do Saturday and Sunday?
I know you said you weren't going to do a
Yeah,
ton of
no,
Pokemon.
that's true. Yeah, we, my wife and I celebrated 8 years of marriage. Today was our anniversary, but we went and took
Congrats.
and thank you. We took an anniversary trip over the weekend up to Northern Virginia. So we stayed at like a super nice hotel in if you're familiar with Northern Virginia, which I don't think you are, but it was in Tyson's Corner, which is like the bougiest mall in America, essentially, or one of
Okay.
them. They have like a Prada store and all this kind of stuff, like just all the luxury stores. We didn't shop at any of that, but like we stayed at a nice hotel. We had some like rewards points with our credit card or something like that, so we just booked a nice hotel, like, and then hung out Friday, and then Saturday went into the city and went to the National Gallery and just walked around and looked at art for 4 hours, and then ate some good food for lunch and dinner. And then yeah, we just did a little bit of bar hopping, I guess, at the night. Sydney, one of her best friends from college era, went to George Mason or George Washington, one of the uh, whatever's over in Arlington. I don't really know all that well, but we went to one of her like favorite bars from that era, so that was fun.
Okay.
And then came back Sunday. We did some shopping, came back, and then yesterday had GLC night, which was kind of a dud, but that's okay. We had like some new people show up, so it was fun. So not a whole lot of Pokemon, but great time just hanging with my wife and having some kind of quality time in that relationship. So that was good. How
For
about you,
sure.
man? How was your week?
Definitely need it. Pretty good. Pretty good. Except on Saturday, went to a League Cup and unfortunately went 3-2 with Goldengo
Mm.
Dragapult and just had the worst best of one experience that I've had in a while, where first three rounds was either first three rounds didn't open with a supporter and just managed to still somehow come out of that at uh, with 2 wins in 3 of those games, and
Okay.
then go into round 4 and play an actual like legitimate game against a straight Dragapult deck, which was pretty interesting. Like we were both playing Genesect, so we shut off each other's ace specs and kind of went back and forth. And I was able to talk, like we talked about the game afterwards, and I was able to get Monkey Dory down on the bench with a dark early enough that I could boss up his Dracloak that had all of the energies on it and just put him several turns behind and kind of swing the game back in my favor from there. Um, and then it turned out that he had actually had the Dragapult in hand, and he just decided to be greedy and go for an extra turn of Recon Directive because he
Uh,
didn't feel like he was ready to attack yet.
yeah.
And then the next round after that, played against Raging Bolt and lost. That was a game, and I know you specifically have said that you don't like when people complain about this, but I I feel like I lost the game purely off of my prize cards. Um,
Yeah.
so I prized the one of Countercatcher and Pheasantipity, and I feel like if I'd had one or the other of those, the Fez wouldn't have really guaranteed anything, but the Countercatcher would have set me up for a play after they took a prize on their first turn, KOing a Dreepy with Fan Rotom. I could have bossed around that one prizer, killed the Teal Mask Ogerpon on the bench, and taken 2 energy off the board and removed the only Terra Pokemon that they had in play. So making Noctowl unavailable and just kind of really slowing things down, making it more difficult to take the knockout with Bolt. And instead, I had to settle for a simple, tiny little one prize KO and just being a turn short, essentially, the rest of the game. But that happens. And unfortunately, that is the business that we play in with League Cups and League Challenges with Best of One. It was a really sour experience with the deck as a whole. Like for half of
Mm.
my games to just feel like the deck didn't function, and then also having like a 60% win rate is not super great when you need to do better than that to make cut at these events.
Yeah.
It put me off of Goldango pretty far. I don't think that I'm going to be picking it up for the rest of this format, even though I do have another League Cup coming up this weekend.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna try to play in a League Cup coming up on the 10th. But it just depends. I have to do like go out of town for work one weekend next month,
Sure.
so we'll have to see how that all shakes out. But yeah, man, best of one. I feel a little bit more sympathetic to people prizing stuff in single game than I do in like a series, where you can like, okay, I'm not gonna win this game, so scoop and go next. But
Sure.
like, yeah, it sucks.
It
there's
happens,
just
but it
there's
happens though.
games
Like that
there's
just
just
kind of
games where it's just not your
right.
day, you
Like
know.
that part of that is that's card games at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
I like because of that I just unfortunately I was like I let that kind of ruin the rest of my afternoon for Saturday, which is
Yeah.
just that's a me thing. Like I didn't need to let that happen, but I was in just a really sour mood for the rest of the day. Um, but have come back around in a positive manner. I think like even though the ladder just reset like 2 days ago, I'm already back in Arceus here on TCG Live.
Love it.
Mostly off the back of playing the low elo donk deck that has been going around to burn my way up to Ultra Ball, and then from there playing real decks to get the rest of the way. So you really only need to win like a net, I think, 15 games to make it to Arceus once you get to Ultra Ball. And
Okay.
so when you play the hardcore 4 Pecharunt, 4 Brute Bonnet, multiple Squawkabilly, Iron Valiant, I'm only going to win if I donk you deck, you can freely concede at the lower elos because you don't lose any points.
Uh,
And so that has become a somewhat popular strategy going into, but and the
yeah.
it's silly, but it kind of highlights the fact that people don't want to play at the lower end of the ladder, especially if you end up in a game with someone who's either not playing what they would consider a real deck, so they don't feel like it's a good use of their time because they're trying to use it as a practice or testing tool. And I don't know, that it just kind of highlights the fact that the system probably needs to change in some regard.
Yeah, definitely not a hard reset every ladder reset like that. I mean, you go down to like Great Ball, or is it even back to
I don't
Pokemon?
remember which one it is. It's either
But
Pokeball or Quick Ball, I think, but I'm
yeah,
not
but
sure
it
which one
takes
it is.
how long does it take generally to have to grind up to Ultra Ball from
Oh, it
there?
takes forever. I mean, because the
Yeah.
gains are the same. So normally, if you win, you get 10 points. If you're on a win streak, you get 13. And if that win streak ever gets reset, again, you don't lose any points until you get to Ultra Ball. And if you're losing in Ultra Ball, you lose anywhere from three. I think it's 3 points if the person has more points than you, 6 points if they have less, and then if they're in a lower tier than Ultra Ball, you lose like 10 or 12. So it is possible to demote out of Ultra Ball, I think,
Okay.
but realistically, like if you're just playing a half decent number of games, once you get there, you can pretty easily progress. The other things that have happened though, so the TCG Pocket finished their first ranked season. I did not make it to Master Ball. I just could not bring myself to finish that grind, even though I was in Ultra Ball 1 and needed like right around 100 more points to do it. Just did not find the will to push through what felt like an iron wall at the end of the day. But that's okay
Mm.
because the way that their ladder reset works, it hasn't happened yet. Like ranked is not available yet in the game. They're waiting for the new
Oh,
set to
the new
come
set,
out,
yeah.
which actually drops tomorrow morning as of our recording of this. And for the first time in the recent history, we don't have any leaks aside from the cards that they revealed in that trailer. So we cannot talk about any new pocket cards this week.
Yeah,
But
just a couple.
except for one, there's one very notable card that we already know is coming to Pocket, and I think that
Yeah.
is going to be a game changer and actually might make a lot of people more interested in playing the game, and that is Rare Candy. So we know Rare Candy's coming to the game. That means Stage Twos are back on the menu in what has otherwise been a hardcore Darkrai Giratina metagame. Being able to do something like lead with Sprigatito and Rare Candy into Meowscarada, which attacks for 2 energy, or any other stage 2 that attacks for only 2 energy, or doing something like using the new Charizard EX from Shining Revelry, you Rare Candy into that on turn 2 and use its attack to go fetch 3 energy to itself. Like stage 2s, select stage 2s, I should say, have a pretty decent chance of coming back in a big way in this expansion, I think.
I agree.
But we'll have to see the rest of the cards to see how that shakes out. And I don't know, man. I think that I know I've said it every single time we talk about Pocket. I am waiting for them to announce the official circuit for this game.
Yeah. I can imagine something at Worlds, like they do a showcase or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see it. It might not be till next season that they announce anything. I don't know. But yeah, I definitely I like Pocket. I've played a lot of. I actually started playing ranked a little bit more.
Okay.
Haven't lost a game in ranked yet, but I'm still like at the bottom levels.
Sure.
So I'm
Yeah, I'm
still playing
curious.
Dark Eye
I'm curious if
Giratina.
you've actually played against a real person yet. Like, I'm
Yeah,
wondering, did everyone grind out of Pokeball so you're only playing against bots until you get to like Great Ball now? Or
uh, I played so Pokeball and Great Ball. So it's like
okay,
beginner, Pokeball, Great Ball, and then I think now I'm in whatever there's after Great Ball.
after Great
Um,
Ball's Ultra Ball.
oh, then I'm still in Great Ball.
Okay,
So let's see. So yeah, Pokeball was like mostly bots,
yeah,
and then Great Ball was like 3 people for everyone, like 3 to 1 for bot ratio. The
gotcha.
bots are terrible, but like
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
I honestly
literally a
played
waste
in
of
Great
time.
Ball almost every game was against a real person. So,
Okay,
but like they're still not like, dude, Darkrai Giratina is just dumb right now. Like, I'm glad that we're getting rare candy, and hopefully it shakes it up because the meta is getting kind of stale.
yeah.
Um, so
It's one of those decks though. It's the first good deck in a
yeah,
Pokemon card game that I've actually found enjoyable to play.
true.
And that's because probably that like the customization in Pocket is a little bit different than what you would see in a standard physical TCG deck, and that it all generally comes from the trainer section. And so
Hmm.
when you take that same Darkrai Giratina deck, if you play cards like Rocket Grunt or Pokemon Center Lady, or how many tool cards you play, or how many Cyrus and Sabrina you play, and different things like that, all affect the mirror matchup in particular. And
Yeah,
that's actually a pretty interesting matchup when both people draw decently well and are setting up.
yeah,
But
yep. Playing the mirror is fun at times. Like you have to like kind of think a few turns ahead and
yeah,
then figure it
yeah,
out from there. Like say, okay, well, I don't want to swing with Giratina first because then they can just go respond with their own Giratina and then like damage it with a Darkrai and then respond, take a knockout. Um, but yeah, it's not like a hard deck, but it still like has intricacies for sure. I think I like the direction Pocket's going after playing it more. Like it's just like yeah, I can definitely see this having legs and like getting to the point where we're having competitive battles that actually like feel enjoyable and take skill
yeah.
to play. So that's
Well,
cool.
now that they're introducing cards that actually provide decision trees for people
Hmm.
instead of just okay, attach your energy and attack, or flip for Misty and then
Yeah.
attack. You actually like, okay, do I want to trigger this ability? Where do I attach this tool card? Do I need to attach to my Darkrai this turn or my active? Like when do I want to do this 20 damage ping? Do I heal this turn? Do I need to do I need to worry about my opponent getting rid of my hand? Do I want to get rid of their hand? And you have a bunch of options as the game goes on. And generally, over the course of that prolonged game, you'll have access to your entire deck. So being
Hmm.
able to properly sequence things actually becomes a skill that is relevant in the game. Where I feel like earlier on in its life cycle, it was just in a lot of ways the variance factor was much higher.
I agree. Yeah, definitely playing this deck. Like, I mean, it's also just playing big basics, I guess. But
Sure. Yeah.
like, if you get the Darkrai and Giratina out, you're having a full game. So like, that's fair. Like the only games that I lost or like didn't feel good were like when I only got one basic Pokemon the
Yeah.
whole game, and that yeah, that
But
doesn't
then you
really happen.
chalk like that's variance, that's card games. And
Yeah,
then you just hit play again and you move
yep,
on.
yep. Speaking of
But yeah,
moving on,
yeah, we will move on from this now. We will probably take some
we'll
time, maybe a
yeah,
little bit, to talk about some of the new cards from Pocket, depending on how that looks. Following next week, depending on what other news we have outside of the Milwaukee results. But before we get to that, we first need to talk about what happened this past weekend over in Sevilla, Spain. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
that
It
sounds
looks
about
like
right.
it looks like Seville, but I know it's a Spanish word, so I'm going to assume that it's Sevilla. But anyway, so we're looking at the general metagame percentages for the overall tournament, and we can see once again Dragapult number one deck. If we turn this variant grouping off, Dragapult Dust Noir continues to be the number
Wow.
one deck, but Straight Dragapult on its own legs is number four. So when you combine them together, number one archetype as a whole, Raging Bolt and Goldango still occupying those 2 and 3 slots, and Gardevoir creeping up ever so slightly more again, continuing that rise. I think that these are the same top 6 decks that we had last week in Monterey, and the only
Huh.
difference being that in Atlanta, Gardevoir was not in that top 6 and was replaced by, I believe, Terapagos, but it may have been something else. I honestly can't remember right now. But then when we go and look at the day 2 metagame, we see some shakeups. We see Joltik rising up from its, day 1, it was number 7, admittedly. But when we look at day 2, it jumps up to number 5. Terrabox and Archaludon fall down by the wayside slightly. And our top 4 gets a little bit of a shakeup as well, with Gardevoir converting better than Goldango and Raging Bolt to move up into that second place slot, while Dragapult maintains number 1. And none of this is really surprising if you've been following this format. Gardevoir and Dragapult have proven that they are far and away the most consistent, most powerful decks. And it's a wonder that they aren't the number 1 and 2 most played to begin with. And I think that the probably perceived simplicity of decks like Goldango and Raging Bolt are what cause players to flock to them more, coupled with the fact that we have people saying that Raging Bolt theoretically has a good matchup into one or both of these stage 2 decks, which is not an opinion that I believe John or I share. But
Nah.
but then the Goldango, by the same token, it's something where it has anecdotally has a good matchup into Dragapult. It can be teched to be good into both Dragapult and Gardevoir, but I think you have to selectively choose which of those matchups you really want to target in your list. And in doing so, you're probably sacrificing the other one a fair bit. But the big
Yeah.
thing to talk about is just the continued rise and continued increased play rate of this Joltik deck. And in a lot of ways, we're going to talk about the list here in just a little bit. But in a lot of ways, John, this reminds me of Lugia from the pre-rotation format, in that you take your setup turn, you get your big board of guys set up, and you just start swinging. And half the game, you're just looking for boss to end the game. And,
Hmm.
If your opponent doesn't have an answer to your attacker, you just keep swinging. You go for the early Iron Hands, and that's a play that Lugia was often able to leverage pretty early on. Except this now has 2 potential game plans that it gets to accomplish into 2 different sets of matchups, and it kind of leverages attackers like Iron Hands and like Pikachu, which are good in different situations, and it leverages them very effectively into those 2 different situations, allowing the deck to have more flexibility than you would kind of first assume it looks like it should have.
Yeah, I think it's probably it's definitely the best way to play Iron Hands right now.
Oh, sure.
And that's similar to how Lugia was the best way to play Iron Hands when it was in format. So that definitely has a lot of similarities. And then yeah, we talked a little bit before, but I felt like yeah, I agree with it. The statement Lugia is all about your bench management, and like you win and lose based on what Pokemon you put on your bench, and you're basically just creating like checkmate scenarios for your opponent
Yeah.
and saying, "Do you have an answer for this? Okay, great. And how about this one? Okay, how about this one?" And it's the same way with Jolting Box. Like if you get that set up turn 1, turn 2, you're basically just posing questions for your opponent and forcing them to have answers, and that's basically your whole game plan. And we see basically if you put yourself like, and as long as you don't checkmate yourself, like as long as you don't fill up your bench with too many Pokemon or like put your energy in a bad spot early, you should be pretty good. Like you should have multiple ways to close out a game, and go from there. And
Yep.
I like the deck. It's a cool deck. I haven't really played any with it. It's one I probably need to pick up and play, because I don't think I have it built or anything like that. But I definitely want to try it out probably in the next few weeks.
Sure. And so moving on, we can look at the results from this event, and we see once again Gardevoir takes another major dub.
Hmm.
And we're not going to pull this list up. Yoan played literally card for card Brent Tonneson 60 for Monterey Regionals last week. And then in second place, we have Pedro Vicencio on Straight Dragapult, Harvey Scheinman on En's box or Enzorak Darmanitan, Pyotr Matlinsky on Terra box, Thomas Jones on Straight Dragapult, Arthur Vincent with Frostless Monkey Dory, Bali Olafon with Gardevoir, Kim Pobega on Straight Dragapult, Raquel Hazim on Raging Bolt, and Thomas Abbott bringing that Joltik box into the asymmetrical cut, rounding things out at 10th place. And so some of the lists we're going to highlight here, the first one we're going to look at is Pedro's straight Dragapult list, which is consistent, is one word that I could use to describe this deck. You know, we see 4 Buddy Possum,
Yeah.
4 Ultra Ball, 4 Brock Scouting, 4 Research, 4 Boss, 4 Iono, a third copy of Dragapult. It's got 3 Countercatcher in addition to those 4 Boss, you know. And to make room for all of these additional consistency cards, Pedro opted to cut Arvin out of the deck completely and is also running 0 tool cards.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 0 rare candy. 0. Um,
No Crispin, no EXP
yeah.
share.
No, no gimmicks. It's all consistency for the most part. No night stretcher, which was a big thing I noticed.
Yep.
And it kind of puts you in a weird spot if your opponent like knows that you don't run any night stretcher. They could target your Monkey Dory, and then you're not able to use that the rest of the game. Yeah, this is a kind of big departure from how Dragapult's been played at the beginning of this format. We're definitely seeing the effects of Badoo more and more as this format progresses. We're now at the point where, okay, we're just not going to run items. We're just going to get our Poffin turn 1 and then Brock Scouting and Recon Directive for all my energy. And then it doesn't matter. Like if you Badoo me, it's like, cool, I can still accomplish my game plan. You know, Brock Scouting for the Dracloaks, Brock Scouting for the Dragapult, and then I can find my energy just using Recon Directive. I don't even run Earthen Vessel in this list. Like you don't run any way to search out energy as an item. So you're basically relying upon drawing into it, including your. I think this is probably the biggest shocker for me was seeing a Neo Upper in this list. We've seen Unfair Stamp more and more. So this was definitely like a big change of pace from previous, I'd say. It doesn't run any tools, which I guess fits with Tool Jammer. I think you already said that. I apologize. But it's such a different take on this list. I don't know how you feel about it. I definitely was a little like hesitant to embrace this kind of a play. But it's consistent. I mean, you can't knock it for that. Like you get to run some really powerful Pokemon. You get to run a Monkey Dory. I don't know. I don't know if I like the Neo Upper at all. It just seems like you have no way to search it out. But I guess it's probably the best ace spec if you're not running on Fair Stamp or running Crystal.
Right.
You know,
and when you're not running Arvin, you can't really effectively run those cards as well anyway.
Right.
And so when you're not, you know, the deck's not running Crispin, it's not running EXP share, so it needs some way to be able to attack with a Dragapult with no energy on board. And I think that that's kind of the angle where you approach Neo Upper from. There are things like this deck, looking at it more, it reminds me so much of old Pokemon decks.
Yeah.
Where you've just got 16 or more supporter cards, and then you're using an onboard Pokemon ability to filter out for the other cards that you're looking for. And the effects of a lot of these supporter cards are very reminiscent of old school, very simplistic supporter cards. You're not doing anything super fancy with your supporters, but you're doing very powerful things. And being able to leverage that with probably the best stage 1 evolving ability in the game right now, and one of the best attacking stage 2s in the game, is, you know, generally just a pretty good recipe for success. There are things about this list that I personally would want to change. Like I feel like like you've mentioned, the no night stretcher. I feel like you either want one night stretcher or even maybe a second super rod. Just playing 4 research and only 1 recovery card. What if you have to discard that pretty early on? It just makes your resources so finite for the rest of the game. Or if you like
prize a energy, like you prize a Luminous, and then you have to discard a fire turn 1, then you have 1 fire, 1 Luminous, and then the Neo Upper. Like if your opponent gets that Genesect with the ace spec neutralizer or whatever ability, you're basically got 2 energy for your Dragapults for the whole game. And if you attach Luminous, you have to find, like, I mean, that's not too bad, but I don't know. I do like the synergy with Luminous in this. You know, I think that's a cool thing that we've seen come out is the Luminous for Monkey Dory, and then you can flex it into using it for Dragapult.
Absolutely.
I wonder if we'll ever see like Enhanced Hammer come out now and try to make a comeback with Luminous being on the rise. but probably not. I
I
think it's
think
still kind of a niche.
with our itchy green friend, the card
Yeah.
that we might be more likely to see is actually Ruffian,
Okay.
which one targets the tools that are going on a lot of these Badoos, but also has the flexibility to go and hit the luminous energies, the neo upper energies. I guess theoretically you could hit like jet energy, but it also hits sparkling crystal. It knocks tools off of um, things that have like
Genesect.
vengeful punch. It knocks the tools off of Genesect. So it's got merit, but I feel like it would have to go in a very specific deck that really needs that utility out of the card. One thing I did want to look at before we move on from Peter's deck is just what all he ended up playing against, just to see. I was curious how much Dragapult Mirror he ended up having to play.
7, 8,
So we
and
see
then
three total throughout the
yeah,
event.
looks like that. And none of them were. I don't know if it shows Dusknoir in this.
It would, yeah,
Okay, so they're all straight pulled.
yeah.
Which straight pulled now I think is that the preferred variant? Like day one, was that the preferred variant?
No, it was actually the Dust Noir was more popular, and I think in
Hmm.
a lot of ways that's still because that is the one that the average player is more practiced on.
Okay.
And for in many scenarios, I think a lot of people view Dust Noir as like a security blanket for Dragapult. They're more afraid to tackle things like that mirror without it, and reasonably, the Dust Noir variant is more favored into Gardevoir than the Straight Pult variant is.
Sure.
I still think it's probably unfavored on the whole, but it is more likely to win because it has the ability to one hit KO Gardevoir, whereas the other variant does not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
I think that's been interesting is that Dragapult, like if we've looked at what has done well, what has basically made the finals, other than Hedrick, I think, who had Pult, Dragapult had a Dusknoir in his, right?
yeah, yeah,
Everybody else has had no Dusknoir, and we've seen
right,
it a time and time again from the last few weeks. Like Dusknoir is kind of on the way out, right? At least at the top. Like I mean, from the top players, I think a lot of the top players have moved
sure,
away from Dusknoir.
yeah. Well,
Um,
without that Dusknoir line, you've got 5 spots in your deck to leverage for more supporter cards or just other powerful cards that you want to fit into your deck, like the Monkey Dory, like extra copies of Boss's Orders, or just more draw supporters, more search cards, making your deck more consistent, albeit while sacrificing some potential raw power or some options in that regard.
yeah,
Yeah, it seems that that's probably enough Dragapult for now. We can go ahead and move on to
that's fair.
one of the new kids on the block in the Journey Together format that I wanted to see be successful and just kind of fell flat pretty early on in the meta game. But now
Yeah,
things have cycled around enough. Gardevoir has gotten itself back into the mix, and that's allowed the Dark type and Zoroark focused deck to come back into the limelight and do
yeah.
what it
We
does best.
we've seen it come up more and more. I'd say. I think I've heard rumblings of players trying to switch over and play this while it's still relevant, while it's still good. But I think we had to find a good list for it. That was a big part of it, and this is really narrowing in on that. This
Yeah.
is like a good. I'd say this is a good list. In my like from everything I've seen, this is the way I'd want to play this deck. You're still able to use Darmanitan with your reversal energies, but yeah, just a good mix. You're running Badoo and Cleffa. Cleffa, I think, was a huge include for this deck. And in the interview for this list, from the pilot of this, and I think his top 4 match, or sorry, top 8 match, Harvey, he won it, and he's just basically like, yeah, the deck's great once you set up, but you have to run cards like Cleffa in order to set up, which makes a lot of sense. Like the early turns with this deck, it's kind of a clunky. You don't have easy ways to search out your stage ones. This list is, instead of trying to go with an Arvin build, much more focused on the research and Iono angle, like we've seen from a lot of other lists as this format's progressed. But since you're running stage ones, you just kind of have to burn through your deck and try to find stuff. You don't run that much recovery, but you run enough. You run, one night stretcher, one super rod, and that should be enough to get you to the finish line. Once you get set up, you're pretty good. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a lot of things going, like not a whole lot of moving pieces, and trade's just broken. Like anybody that's played with trade, has fond thoughts and memories of it. And now, yeah, we get to see like just this is dialing on the right kind of combination.
For sure. And you have tools in this deck. I think the meta game is one of the things that really held this deck back before, in
True.
that, like you said, the setup can be clunky. Like the big stumbling block, and this is a design choice by the game devs, I believe, is like Darumaka has 80 HP, so you can't buddy poffin for it, and that makes it ever so slightly more difficult to get things off the ground, which is fine. Like that can be a weakness of the deck, is it may be a little bit slower to get going. And then the requirement for your Zoroark that it needs a partner on the bench to ping an attack off of, because Night Joker is pretty powerful in being able to use a wide swath of attacks, even though it often gets narrowed down to just Flame Body Cannon and Virtuous or Victorious, and whatever Reshiram's attack is called,
Hmm.
or Rage, I guess, as well. But with Gardevoir coming back, being able to go something like Countercatcher or Boss Guardy and hit it for 340, and then your opponent's only response is to build another Gardevoir and get a Bravery Charmed Drifloon to come take you out, like you're in a pretty good spot to then leverage that matchup, boss the Drifloon to the bench, and Flay Body Cannon for 2 prizes, or not even boss it, just KO it and KO something on the bench.
Hmm.
So that matchup's pretty easy to seal up nice and tight. And with a good enough start, you can also leverage things pretty well into Dragapult as well. Now that people are starting to include things like Power Glass, so you can have a Zoroark that uses Flame Body Cannon and immediately recovers the Dark Energy to pressure a potential Flame Body Cannon on the follow up turn as well.
Yeah, this is like a list that's running all the cards I would want to run in this list. And the way that it does that is by like thinning out kind of there's not many Arvin. You're just saying I'm going to draw into everything, and like
Sure.
so that's kind of the cheat code for this in a lot of ways. Um, and you're saying I'm going to rely on trade to find me what I need when I need it, and
Yep.
I'm not going to worry about supportering it out or secret box or whatever the hyper aroma, any of that. I'm going to run prime catcher because when I have a snipe attack and I can just cherry pick targets, like I can wipe two Curlia at the same turn or two Dracloak in the same turn.
Yep.
Seems pretty good.
Definitely. And finding everything more consistently off of trade makes it even better.
Yep.
And like you said, I think that the Cleffa is an interesting nod where a lot of people have used two Badu in the past. And this deck doesn't typically want to do this long drawn out Badu war. You want to go hunt down these stage ones. So having something that more proactively lets you go filter through cards in your deck to find them is a pretty good shout.
Hmm.
Next deck to talk about here is the Frostless Monkey Dory from Arthur Vincent. And notably, I feel like this list doesn't show anything that people haven't necessarily seen before from this deck. But if people haven't seen this deck before, the general game plan is you're item locking with Itchy Pollen or Counter Catcher and corner stalling something with Maractus while you slowly amass damage on your board and your opponent's board and move the damage from your board to your opponent's board with Monkey Dory, and just trying to make your opponent's life as awful as possible as you slowly whittle them down throughout the game.
Yep. This is kind of the control deck of the moment, I'd say. We've seen a little bit of Pidgeot control at the very beginning from All Out Blitzel in the like online era of this format, but as we progressed, we've moved away from that, and we've seen a lot more of corner come up. And Maractus has been included in a lot of decks lately, and it's seen here too, which is kind of an interesting include for this list. We've seen Budu Frostlast before, and everything else, but I definitely think Maractus is a good include. You're able to pile up, like if you can get like a Fezandipity active and get 3 or 4 turns of just passive damage from Frostlast, you can definitely control the game from there. Um, yeah, this list isn't anything too crazy. I like the counter gain in a lot of ways. You can run it for Maractus or for Blood Moon. I don't think there's anything too innovative other than the Maractus. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at this just kind of. It makes a lot of sense. The two TM Devos is really nice in this format, especially when you have the two top decks being stage 2 attacking or attacks that damage themselves. So once you get a few turns of passive damage built up, you can just go, okay, TM Devo, and now we're at the point where we can just kind of board wipe from there and remove any threat from that side and just clean up with Blood Moon or even whatever at that point. Monkey Dories can just
For sure.
do enough to knock out everything else on the board. But yeah, TM Devo is really strong right now. I think it's kind of underutilized in a lot of decks, especially now that we don't have rare candy. I guess it's not as impactful. If we're not trying to rare candy stuff out, it doesn't make as
Sure.
big a difference. But it's still really good when you have the ability to like put a bunch of damage on something and then TM Devo. I mean, that seems pretty good.
Absolutely.
So
Like this deck is like you said, I don't know if I'd fully put it into the control category, but it
mhm.
reminds me a lot of control in the sense that it's not a deck that people enjoy testing against. And
Right.
therefore, unsurprisingly, a lot of people are probably under tested into this matchup. And if you are not able to formulate a game plan and how to go about, evolving your guys, what pace do you want to evolve your Pokemon at? When is it safe to go in and put a bunch of abilities on the board versus holding cards back to try to mitigate how much damage is building up? Is it okay to put this thing down that could potentially be a counter catcher target? How many switch outs do I still have in my deck? Things that you don't fully always need to think about in every matchup are very, very crucial to think about in this matchup. But, for people that are less familiar with this matchup, one of the generally pretty easy ways to go about it um, is to actually hard target either the Frostlass or the Monkey Dory with the Dark on it, depending on how many Monkey Dories they already have established. But most of the time, this deck operates with one Frostlass on the board because if they have more than one, the damage accumulates on their side of the board a little bit too rapidly for them to really pull it all off of them without giving you opportunities to kind of counter push into them, or they end up taking prize cards too rapidly, and that's not the game plan that this deck wants to do. It wants to control the pace of the game as much as it can and move it in the way that it wants to, while maintaining generally a prize deficit until it's about to win the game.
Mhm.
Um, and with that, you'll notice there's only one card that directly searches Frostlass in this deck list. So
Yeah.
if you are able to knock out that first Frostlass, they're then dependent on either raw drawing into a new one, or they have to Night Stretcher to recover that, and that's another resource that is finite within this deck that you're able to pressure outside of that. So if you're looking at how to tackle this deck, and it's something that you're not fully familiar with, the first thing I would lean into is clearing the snow runs off the board, obviously. But if there is a Frostlass on the board, take it out. If you cannot take out multiple Monkey Dories turn after turn after turn.
Yeah, definitely. That's good advice. I played a little bit of this on the ladder. And yeah, definitely like if they start realizing that your Frostlass are the real threat, it gets
Mm-hmm.
pretty over pretty quick. So I don't think that's solid advice.
Yep. Next deck to talk about is Raging Bolt from Raquel Hazim in ninth place. And again, I don't have, because we're using the labs site from Limitless, I'm not positive about this claim, but I'm pretty sure this is the same list that All Out Blitzel and Christian Fontenot played to Atlanta. If not, it is within two cards. But just the big thing, you have your new modern owl based Raging Bolt deck with one Baby Bolt and one Slitherwing. Um, the things that are pushing Raging Bolt into being more successful as this format has gone on are the decrease in Dragapult, because I feel overall Dragapult is the worst matchup for this deck between Dragapult and Gardevoir, and also now the increase in Joltik in particular is actually a very, very good matchup for this deck because it is one of the few decks that can very easily answer what your opponent is trying to do. So you have Slitherwing, which answers literally every attacker in their deck that is not Iron Leaves or Clefairy, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But you KO the Iron Hands and the Pikachu, the two main attackers of the deck, go down to a Burning Turbulence. And what's your opponent's response to that? To come take one prize from you? And then if that attacker is not a Pikachu, you have a Raging Bolt sitting in the wings ready to come take them out. And if they try to play back and do things like some weird slow game plan, that's when you can leverage something like the small Raging Bolt, which your opponent has a pretty hard time knocking out for a meaningful gain in prizes. You can't amp you very much that Raging Bolt for two prizes very easily. I guess some lists do play one of the future booster capsules, so maybe they can. But even so, the pressure that this deck is able to put onto Joltik in particular is something that if you expect Joltik to be very heavily played in your metagame, whether that's at Milwaukee or any League Cups or challenges you're playing this week, I would definitely consider sleeving up Raging Bolt heading into this weekend.
Hmm. That's a statement that I don't think I could say. I don't think I could ever recommend Raging Bolt. I think it's still good, but it's still very linear. Like it has some good tools, and we've said it's been better positioned in this meta for sure than it has been in the last few weeks. But I still think like if you're going up against somebody that knows how to take advantage of your recovery or your lack thereof,
Yeah,
and just but do you at the right time, it can be really really difficult to win this game when against those kind of decks. Or if they corner you, you don't really have a lot of good options for that. So there's just a lot of ways to play around this deck. Still,
sure.
but it's still good. Like if you're looking for something that just has the highest raw power level in the game right now, it's probably this or Golden Go, and I'd give the nod to this over Golden Go as far as a consistency. Like if you're looking for a consistency, like a deck that has the highest level of consistency, I'd probably say this is there. Just having and the Noctowl engine, Squawkabilly, and then yeah, just being able to accelerate with Sada. Sada's such a good supporter right now.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
And then the deck now being able to play Crispin more reliably because you have the Owl engine, because the format slowed down enough for that to be possible. We had seen people try to utilize the Owl engine with Raging Bolt when Pokestop was still in the format, and decks were just too fast for it back then. But now that that is more reasonable to do, and decks are a little bit slower, you get to see cards like this Baby Raging Bolt come out to play and actually be impactful in games. One last note before we move on: the reason also that I would say that Raging Bolt is slightly better positioned this weekend in particular are that we're seeing these Dragapult lists that are actually moving away from Unfair Stamp. And I've seen people are either going back to Crystal, or they're putting in the Neo Upper Energy, or I think that there actually were a couple of fairly successful lists that even played something like Hero's Cape
hmm,
just to make the biggest Dragapult possible.
okay.
And, if something like that is happening, this deck doesn't care if Dragapult has an extra 100 HP. You just blow it up anyway. But the big thing there is not having the stamp. Like the Iono or the Disruption cards are really what hurt Raging Bolt the most. And when those are less in the picture, the deck has a better chance to thrive.
Yeah, I agree. This cool running energy switch. I like that in this build. Allows you to like maybe uh, if you have burning turbulence one turn and then they're trying to like they don't knock out your Slitherwing and you don't really want to use burning turbulence again because you might knock yourself out again. You can energy switch off and put it on a Raging Bolt and then go from there.
Sure.
Or I think probably more importantly is get powering up the Raging Bolts, the baby Raging Bolts first attack and
Mm-hmm.
picking stuff up. Really, really key for that in some matchups. Thunderburst Storm for
Yeah.
lightning and fighting. It does 30 damage for one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So yeah, you need 3 energy to knock out pretty much anything useful in this format for 90. So very helpful for that.
Yeah. And the big thing, that this card is the most powerful when you're able to get it down on turn one with an energy on it, and
Yeah,
that's when
yeah.
it applies the most pressure. And that energy switch is kind of the mitigation for when that isn't possible for you. One thing that we don't see in this list that I actually do think is probably a pretty good inclusion for Raging Bolt this weekend is Ditto, just because
Okay.
it makes it more consistent for you to either get a Raging Bolt out or to get an Ogerpon on the board for your Noctowl going into turn
Sure.
two. And just there's a large amount of pressure that you can apply into a lot of evolving deck matchups by having a baby Raging Bolt with energy active on turn one.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's a good way to look at it.
And then
Um,
the sorry
yeah, go ahead.
last deck here before we move up. There's one more deck I want to talk about, but it's not actually from Sevilla. But the last deck from Sevilla is just a more standardized, more
Refined, maybe.
streamlined
Yeah.
version of the Joltik box that we saw from Tyler Matthews last week. And this is piloted again by Thomas Abbott coming into this week. And I'm sure there were other very successful lists, but this is the one that actually made asymmetrical cut. And it has kind of all the hallmarks that we've seen from this Joltik box in the past. We've got our 2-1 Galvantula line to have a one prize option that can one hit KO. Zoroark in particular coming out of this weekend. That is a notable KO that you can achieve with Galvantula. You have your 2 Miraidon for consistency, 2 Hands and 2 Pikachu as your primary attackers that you want to go fetch with that tandem unit ability. And then just kind of the smattering of tech Pokemon. Iron Leaves to get you out of retreat lock or one hit KO anything that's grass weak. Blood Moon still being one of the best Pokemon attackers in the game, Latias for flexibility, and then Fez and Mew for consistency, and Clefairy because, we need a way to one-hit KO a Dragon Ball sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is a little more traditional in approach.
Sure.
We're going back to using Arven more than research, which I think I like in this kind of a build. You really don't need much turn one. You just need like the Joltik and then something to power up for the most part. And you're able to do that pretty consistently with this build. Yeah, I like the tools for the most part. EXP share is cool to like put on a Pikachu or something like that. If you lead with Iron Hand, you can then follow up with Pikachu later on. Something like that makes a lot of sense. Or on Miraidon. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's some disadvantages like running Rescue Board and Latias. I don't know what that's exactly all about. I think I would have probably maybe put a switch in over the Rescue Board if for how many things are in corner right now. I guess you can search it out with Arven as the thought early
Yeah,
game. Get into Joltik with that.
that's the exact
Sure.
game plan is if you open any basic, well, not any basic, if you open anything that is not hands and not Blood Moon, you can nest ball for Miraidon and then Rescue Board whatever's active and get into Joltik. And that's something where sense. Like you don't, otherwise you need 2 ball cards to get Latias and Miraidon into play.
Yeah, okay. I'm coming around to that. Okay, makes sense. But and I guess if you open Iron Hand, you can get the future booster capsule.
Right,
and get that
exactly.
Retreat with that.
Yep.
That
so the sense. only truly bad starter is Blood Moon.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. But I don't. Blood Moon's such a powerful card. I don't think you could cut it. But then you could, somehow get Iron Leaves and use that. I guess if you're getting cheeky.
Sure.
But yeah, we saw this was one of the decks I think it featured in ASIM, so just missing out on the top 8 here. We did see it get taken advantage of by Maractus's corner, so that's kind of why I brought that up and wanted to talk about it real quick. But yeah, I think this is still a cool list, a good starting place if you're trying to play this deck. I think very good list to start and try out with. Pretty consistent looking. I'm not seeing any like spicy ticks like Tyler Matthews lists included. Before Crispin seems pretty good. Even if you're not able to get the Joltik down, you can still, get pretty into your attackers fairly effectively.
Sure.
Which is good. So, I don't know.
Yeah, the one tech card here is like the Gravity Mountain.
Oh, true.
Giving you the ability to one-hit KO Gardevoir and or Dragapult with Pikachu. But Gardevoir in particular, being able to be one-hit KO'd is something that the deck notably could not do before. So your only hope was to run them over with Iron Hands. Or hope that the Iron Hands gave you enough pressure to get you through the rest of the game, I guess is a better way to say that. One thing that I think I would like to see in this deck, and it's a little iffy because you don't have the best means of finding it, but I feel like Penny would actually serve a lot of really good utility in here. Even if it's just to pick up Iron Leaves and have 2 switch outs. And to that note, like to that end, maybe just a switch is better, but there are a lot of circumstances where you want to put something like Fez down and then get it out of play so it's not a liability. Or if you open with Blood Moon, you want it off the board so it can't be Counter Catcher and Itchy Pollen repeatedly. So I just feel like Penny has the potential to be a pretty useful supporter in the deck. I don't know specifically what I'd cut for it, but it just seems like an interesting include. This is a relatively straightforward deck that takes, I would say, a rather low number of games to really fully understand. So if you're low on practice in this format, this is probably the deck I would lean on to get the most success going into a tournament in the near term before you potentially want to move on to something that requires a bit more time to really get comfortable with.
Yeah, it's definitely a good entry point into the meta game right now.
Yeah. I mean, your general game plan, literally every matchup, attack with Joltik turn 1, figure out which attacker between Iron Hands and Pikachu is correct in whatever matchup you're in, and go from there. And then there are some really weird niche circumstances you could get into where you could find Blood Moon on turn 1 and go load him up with 4 energies and be ready to go to Bear Town after that. Probably not the best game plan, but it's available.
Yeah, I mean, Beartown's not my favorite place to visit, but I could definitely see a world in which I have to go there because it's, you don't have a lot of other options.
Right, right,
But yeah, no, this is definitely like if I was, I'd probably either give this or Raging Bull to a player getting into the game right now.
for sure. Deck that I would not give to a player getting into the game, and the last deck that I want to talk about before we move on from events from this past weekend is Terrabox, and this is actually the second place list from the Johannesburg SPE that happened down in South Africa. Now there was notably a Terrabox in the top cut of Sevilla, but that was literally towards Fukuoka Champions League list, so I didn't really want to rehash it because it has not, in my opinion, kept up with how this format has evolved. Whereas there are some inclusions in this list that I feel are important as far as being noteworthy that the creator of this list has kept track of what is good in this format and the need to play around or answer those things. And those three cards in particular are the Brock Scouting to give
Hmm.
yourself access to Noctowl under Badu Lock, just to formulate a game plan in future turns moving forward. Or if you get Badooed, you still have a way to go find two basics to get a Terra Pokemon in play, so you can use a Jewel Seeker. Same thing. Depending on what your board looks like, what your hand looks like. Jamming Tower coming in as the third stadium, as opposed to just running 3 Area Zero. One gives you the ability to bump your own Area Zero to get some liabilities off your bench, maybe boot some Noctowls to your discard pile so you can Night Stretcher or Super Rot them back into your deck to get that Jewel Seeker back into play for yourself, or allowing you to clear things like Pheasantipity or Mew or the Blood Moon you started with, or a damaged Pokemon off your bench by getting that Area Zero out of play. Also, turning off the tools against Gardevoir in particular is another really big use case for that card. And then the final card is probably like an undersung card in this deck that I think is not nuanced, but just something that you could kind of glance over if you're just looking at this list. And that is the rescue board. And it serves the purpose of being able to attach to a Noctowl in particular, just because Latias provides free retreat to every other card in the deck because they're all basics. But one of the pitfalls that this deck can hit is when your opponent does something like Unfair Stamp, Countercatcher up a Noctowl, and Itchy Pollen while I build my board back up as Dragapult after you torrential pump me. And if you coincidentally find yourself in a situation where you can still get access to a Noctowl on the following turn, you can specifically go find Rescue Board and Crispin. And suddenly your oh my gosh, I almost said Sob Mask. What is this thing called? Wellspring Mask
Wellspring,
Ogerpon is back in the
oh,
active spot using using Torrential Pump again, thanks to that rescue board on that now swiftly moving owl as it heads back to the bench. So just some nods to, I don't remember which player this is actually. This is Harp TCG. Do not know their actual name. Oh, Harper Kaiser. There we go. So second place at Johannesburg. Was able to take Terrabox to its best finish so far in this format, notably and probably the smallest major tournament of this format. But still, we are seeing some more success for this deck as the format has evolved, and
yeah,
there's probably like less of a spotlight on it.
yeah. I definitely feel like we've kind of put Terrabox in the back seat a little prematurely. And give a shout out to Juancho Saldana.
Yes.
He got first place with a Terrabox list. So I definitely think it still has legs in this meta. And definitely, I don't want to say, I mean, we were like, oh, people tech for Terrabox and are tested against it. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but it's still pretty high power level. It's still a good deck. And we definitely see that here. And definitely, the cool thing about it being a quote unquote box deck is that you can switch cards in pretty easily and make
Mm-hmm.
accommodations for a metagame. And once you do have a feel for a metagame, you can be like, okay, we didn't like, this card or that card. What can we do instead of running, um, all these different things. I think people got fixated on the Tord 60 as like, this is the optimal way to play this, and we can only play it this way. We lose sight of the fact that, well, since it's a box, you can play it however you need to and go from there. Shout out to Harp here. The aura of this deck list is insane. You have so many different artworks just that don't match up. Um, that it puts me on tilt just looking at this. You have the Rainbow Rare Professor's Research mixed in with the regular art Crispin and full art Crispin. You have probably the most tilting for me was seeing my favorite Generations Energy, which optimal energy. That's just my opinion, but that's correct. Mixed with e-reader energy, and then you have what looks like a holographic Scarlet and Violet
That is
era.
for sure a prize pack medal.
Yeah, so prize pack or some other like 151 era metal holographic, and then for base set, yeah, grass energy. So if I had to play against this guy, it's like he literally put whatever was in reach, or I guess I don't know. This is a deliberate act. Like this is a hate crime against my eyes for sure. But you know, what is I can't even tell like some of this stuff. Like he's running the SIR variant of Ogrepon in the top left there, I think, but
Yeah.
next to this,
Yep,
and then
next to
like
the full art one. Yeah, the thing
yeah,
that tilts me the most are the non-matching artwork. So like the
yeah.
mismatched Crispins, the mismatched energy switches, and then 3 different nest
Oh
ball
my gosh,
artworks.
yeah,
That's a
it's
bit much.
crazy.
That's
But then he's
off-putting to
running
me.
all same like the Noctiles are all the same artwork, and like
Right.
I don't know, it's the thing. Like you're like, well, if he's going for all mismatch, he doesn't do that. He just goes for
Just what, like you said,
yeah.
whatever was closest.
No, this is not whatever's close. Like this is a deliberate like you're planning on tilting your opponent by like just overwhelming their senses. Like you're just saying, all right, you know the especially like you're in the era after. I think one of my favorite things about the Scarlet and Violet era is that we no longer have to look at rainbow rares. And he went like all the way back to the Rainbow Rare Professor's Research, and like that's just that's so mean. I hate rainbow rares. They shouldn't. People have been collecting them more and more. I think because we're far enough away to now where they're like nostalgic or look cool.
Sure.
But I
No, they're still ugly as sin.
gosh, they're so bad.
I hope they never come back.
Yeah, please don't
But
ever
anyway,
print rainbow rares again.
that is enough from tournament results from this past weekend. Before we jump into more talk on the evolution of the metagame moving forward, I'm going to go ahead and throw up Blaine's quiz show for this week. And so, as is standard, it is my turn to host Blaine's quiz show this week, where I will be asking John a series of multiple choice questions, where each question is worth a total of 1 point. And John has 1 hint available to him throughout the course of these 3 questions that he can exercise at any time, and I will make that one singular question easier in some way for him. And so this week we have a category of promos. And so John, I've got 3 questions for you here, like I said, and the first one is going to be, how many cards were there in each expansion of the Pop series of promos? And so Pop was a series of 9 promo sets that Nintendo put out during the Ruby Sapphire through Ruby Sapphire Emerald era, I believe, and it may have actually gone slightly further than that. It may have gone into Diamond and Pearl as well. And each of them had the same number of total cards contained within them. And your options are 15, 16, 17, or 18.
All right. I think it might be risky to just use my hint this early, but I think this is my weakest area, so I'm just gonna use it and
Okay.
try to go from there.
The answer is an odd number.
An odd number. Okay, good. So I was leaning towards 16, so I'm glad that I used that. So it's either 15 or 17. I think 15 makes a little more sense if we're thinking about like just organizationally. Like 17 is a prime number, 15 a little bit more divisible, so you can like divvy it up a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe let's just lock in 15.
I like the logic you used, but unfortunately you are incorrect. There were in fact 17 cards per set. And with the exception of Pop 5, which had the Espeon and Umbreon Star promos in it, each set had 6 uncommons, 6 commons, and 5 rares.
Gotcha.
So yeah, moving on to the next question. There were 4 Black Star promos that were released with the first Pokemon movie when people went to see it in theaters. Which one has the lowest promo card number? And the 4 promos that were released with that movie when you went and got a ticket in theaters were Electabuzz, Pikachu, Mewtwo, and Dragonite.
Dude, dang. All right, so I remember the Mewtwo promo. I think that's probably the most prevalent.
Well, it was
I don't.
definitely the most playable, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely the most playable. I don't remember any of the other promos, to be honest with you. So I think I'm just gonna put in Mewtwo and then just hope that's the payoff. And I don't have any other logic to go off of. So
Fair enough. Unfortunately, you are incorrect there. The lowest promo number is Electabuzz at promo number 2. Promo number 1 was a Pikachu, not this one, but it was actually a Nintendo Power promo back when that magazine had promo cards in it, and when that magazine still existed. So, most modern children probably have no idea what Nintendo Power is.
yeah. I vaguely have a memory of it, like seeing it as a kid, but yeah, I never subscribed or anything. But that, yeah, I don't have any way to.
No,
Know.
that's fair.
Okay.
This is definitely
this is tough.
This was a tough question.
Yeah.
And then the last one: which generation of cards has the fewest number of total available promo cards as of April 2025? And your choices are Scarlet and Violet, X and Y, Sword and Shield, or Sun and Moon.
I'm leaning towards Sun and Moon for this one, but it could be X and Y. I think as the sets like progressed, we got more and more promos, so it's either like an earlier one here. Let me just go X and Y. I think there was a pretty quick turnaround between X and Y and Sun and Moon. So I think that might be my logic there.
No, that is definitely sound logic. And you are actually correct.
Finally got one.
So I had a different question that I was going to ask here, but just real quick to provide some numbers. X and Y had a total of 211 promo cards, whereas Sun and Moon went all the way up to 248. Sword and Shield went up to 307. And despite the fact that it is not yet ended, Scarlet and Violet is up to 215 as of April 2025, with more cards on the horizon. So I think that, interestingly, the first question I wanted to ask is which of these is not a promo number 1 in its given era? But I now realize that every single generation, the first promo of that generation is the grass starter. And so it would have been just a dead giveaway of this card is different from the other 3.
What was the you said there was one that didn't have a promo number 1, or
no, every single generation, even going back to like Diamond and Pearl, the first promo card of that generation is always the grass starter Pokemon from that generation.
Gotcha. Yeah,
which in and of itself is a pretty interesting trivia question, but hard to do multiple choice.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see like what's the last promo for each generation.
I did think about that too, but that one was a little bit more difficult and generally kind of vague. Like the X and Y, the last promo card. Do you have any guess as to what it is?
Maybe. So X and Y, we had megas. So I'm guessing like a mega Glegly or something like that.
It is Lucario Spirit Link.
Okay, so
is X and Y promo 211.
Yeah,
is Lucario Spirit Link, which is just something that I never would guess. Like I wouldn't think that a random like tool card would be the final promo card for a generation.
That makes sense. Yeah, definitely kind of random, but that's like the megas were like a lot of promos. That's how they printed them in the US.
Oh, for sure. And so, John, thank you for playing Blaine's Quiz Show this week. You did come away with a 1 of 3 questions, and we will have handy dandy point numbers right here for the week, and we will get a better point tally system moving forward, so I do not have to put them in post.
I think I'm in 3 now, 3 away from you, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's what the gap was, because I definitely had a big old goose egg last week.
Closing the
big
gap.
Old goose egg last week. Yep, definitely. And so now that we've gotten on the other side of trivia, and we've seen some more deck lists, and we've seen some more results from tournaments, how likely is it, do you think, John, that Gardevoir is going to win the tournament this weekend?
Pretty likely, I'd say. I mean, the
Like
deck's
if it
still
ain't
good.
broke,
Like,
don't fix it, right?
exactly. All right. Like, and we've seen top players gravitate towards it. And not all of them. I think probably the majority of the quote unquote top players are still on Dragapult. But it's going to be, in my mind, it's either between Dragapult and it's between Dragapult and Guardy. But I mean, Guardy just, I guess, has the closing power, has the Monkey Dory power, if you will. And I mean, yeah, I think Monkey Dory right now into Dragapult is so powerful. Once you get like two or three established, well, once you get two established, really, you're just negating the damage placement from Phantom Dive every turn, and you're just swinging that matchup so effectively with just that tech or just those cards included in there.
Sure.
And Monkey Dory, like I think it's probably that or Badoo are tied for most impactful Pokemon in this format. And I know like Dragapult and Guardy might be seen as the big two dogs, but they're just kind of. I mean, Dragapult obviously has its own merits as an attacker, but I would say like in every deck that we talked about for the most part, and um, our recap, other than maybe Raging Bolt and Terra Box, they all ran Monkey Dory or or Budew, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, I think that's a fair statement. But
Yeah, outside of the Noctowl decks and Joltik,
yeah,
all of
Joltik,
them,
my bad.
all of them are running Badoo and or Monkey Dory for sure.
Right, or both a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, just being able to manipulate damage counters when it's your turn on your opponent's side of the board and set up KOs effectively and just negate what your opponent's trying to do effectively. It's so powerful. So just I don't know. I think you never can call it saying, yeah, for sure, 100% Gardevoir is going to win this next tournament. We don't know that. But if you had to like pick between that or the field, it's getting harder and harder to pick against Gardevoir in that regard.
Definitely. Okay, so with that in mind, I think the best way to handle this upcoming weekend is with a handful of predictions.
All right. You want me
And
to write them
so,
down?
yes, if you would not mind recording them for this week,
Yeah.
the
Grab.
first one is going to be what has become a standby or a standard prediction in this format, and that is an over under on the number of Badoo in the final top 8. So, not asymmetrical, final top 8. How many Badoo will be present? And so, like we said, we expect Dragapult and Gardevoir to continue to be very successful. Even decks that are rising up, like Zoroark, or random things like Hydreigon that saw some play on stream in Sevilla this past weekend also ran copies of Badoo in their deck. And so we'll set it at an average of one Badoo per list because that seems to be pretty standard as of now. Um, so over under of 4.5 Badoo in top 8.
Okay.
And so I'll lead off here. I actually think I'm going to go and take the under on this because I'm optimistic that neither Dragapult nor Gardevoir is going to win the tournament,
Wow. That's a
which
statement.
is a pretty bold claim to make.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're seeing the rise of some decks. Particularly, I think that we'll see a surge of Zoroark this weekend. I really do. And I think that this is probably the one weekend where the deck has the chance to truly be successful. Because I also think that we will see a decrease in Dragapult, an increase in Gardevoir, and then if there is also an associated increase in Zoroark to match that, we'll see Gardevoir kind of fall by the wayside as it gets just demolished by this sea of flame body cannons.
I don't know if I'm quite that believer
Sure.
that Zoroark's going to be our savior from the Badoo format.
Well, it's funny because the Zoroark still plays Badoo, so maybe
Yeah.
it's totally not the right way to approach the situation.
All that to say, I'll take the over. I think just pricing it out, saying, all right, can we average one Badoo per list if some lists are running two, and most lists are running one, and some are running zero. So
Sure.
I'm expecting like at least six Badoo in the top 8. I don't really see a world in which we don't have multiple Dragapults, multiple Gardevoirs, and then obviously other decks. Like if we have a Monkey Dory Frostlass Badoo, that's 3 for me. So that'll help boost my numbers
Yeah,
immensely if that
definitely.
happens. So I'll take the over on that.
Okay.
I think still Badoo's still kind of the pollen king right now. It's still spring. We still have to be taking our allergy medicines. It's still an itchy pollen season.
Okay, well then here's another new prediction to go into it. Over under on number of Monkey Dory in top 8. And
Okay.
for this one, because we do frequently see Gardevoir lists running 3, and if you play something like Frostlass, you'll have up to 4 in your deck. I'm going to set this over under at 7.5.
You said
And
4.5 for
for
Badoo,
Badoo,
and then
correct.
7.5. Okay.
Yeah. So in keeping with the probably faulty logic that I applied to my Badoo prediction, I'm going to take the under on this one as well, because I do think that this is going to be the weekend where Gardevoir is finally has a lower level of success compared to its previous showings.
Yeah, I would have to take the under too. 7.5 seems a little bit higher than I would think
Well,
for
I
top
mean,
8.
so my logic for that number was if you have 2 Gardevoirs and then like 2 other decks that have 1 Monkey Dory, you hit the over already.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that that's too unreasonable of a likely or of a scenario, but I'm really hedging on Gardevoir not making 2 spots in top 8 is what it boils down to.
Sure. Yeah, I think even if it does, I think there's enough other decks. I don't know. I mean, Dragapult's at the point where now it's starting to run Monkey Dory itself too.
Mm-hmm.
At least all the straight ones without Dusknoir definitely want to run.
Yep.
At least one Badoo or one Dragon Monkey Dory. I guess just to be contrarian, I'll take the over.
Okay.
Just hope for the best. Hope for a
John
whole.
John is a Gardevoir and Frostlass believer.
Yeah,
That's what
I'm
my
Frostlass. Team Frostlass. Frostlass would cover the bet so easily.
for
Like
sure.
one
For sure.
Gardevoir, one
It gets the
Frostlass
Badoos
for chill.
and the Monkey Dories
Yep,
all in one swoop.
yep, yep.
All
All
done.
right. Who can I pay
Um
off?
next less of well, I guess it's a prediction, but it's not numerical. What will be the highest placing Noctowl based deck this weekend? And so obviously the options we have are Terrabox, Raging Bolt, Tank Terrapagos, and Flareon Box are the primary 4 that I would say encapsulate what I would consider to be a Noctowl deck. Obviously, you can play Noctowl with other things. We've seen it with Charizard. You can literally, obviously, you can pair it up with any Terra Pokemon. But I would say those 4 are probably the most likely suspects. So of those 4, which one do we think will be the highest placing this weekend? And I'll let you lead off on this one.
I'm tempted to pick Flareon. I really like the deck, especially into the stage 2 setup deck meta. That being said, all right, I want to take Terrabox, but my heart says Flareon, but my head says Terrabox. I'll just stick with Terrabox.
Okay.
Take the kind of easiest answer there. I think Tank Terrapagos has fallen off a lot.
Yep.
For whatever reason, and
Agreed.
then I just don't believe in Raging Bolt. Y'all should know that by now.
That's fair. I think Flareon is actually in a pretty bad position now,
Okay.
or a much worse position than it was after Atlanta, now that Joltik has hit the scene, because that is a matchup that is just not good for that deck.
That's fair.
Like, the deck has very poor answers to Pikachu, especially when if you Angelite my Pikachu, I just tandem unit it back out and attack with Joltik again.
Yeah.
You really run out of. Eventually, I end up, as the Joltik player, I win that war at the end of the day. So with that in mind, I would not pick Flareon either. And just to, again, be contrarian, I think that I would lean toward Terrabox as well, but just to have a different answer from you, or at least look like I'm not copying your homework, I'm going to pick Raging Bolt, which is, it hurts me to say that out loud, but I also did say earlier, I think that this is a weekend where Raging Bolt is better positioned than it has been previously. And we'll just have to see if that really pans out for it.
And I think this is fun. I heard Uncommon Energy do this. They said pick one player to win the event, just as pick your horse kind of wager.
Okay.
So I hope let's do that. So pick one player you think would win Milwaukee.
Gosh, I don't even know who's going.
Just pick.
I'm
Yeah.
going to. I don't know if he's going, but if he is, he's made top 8 at both regionals he's gone to so far in this format. I'm going to pick Tanner Hurley.
Okay, so Tanner. Yep. And I'll pick Ian Robb. I think that'll be my pick. I think he's long overdue for a regionals win.
Is he actually going to Pokemon this weekend, or is he still playing Magic?
I don't know if he's played Magic as much. Did he play like in the last few months?
I thought he was just at another either Pro Tour or Pro Tour qualifier. I'm not sure.
I don't keep up on Twitter, unfortunately. That's a good question. Well, we'll just have to
that's
see.
fine.
We'll let you know.
He may just like we said, we neither of these players may end up at the event. So I'm just hedging on Tanner. Seems to have a pretty good grasp on the format and has been making adjustments to that Dragapult list that seem to suit the meta even as it continues to evolve. But like you said, I mean, Ian Robb is not someone you can ever not expect to go pretty deep into a tournament. It's a pretty safe pick as well if he's there.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I would love for either of them to win because that is someone who has not yet won a regional. And I need Henry Chow to stop stealing all these invites.
Yeah. It's like almost you want to pick Henry Chow, but I'm like, is he even gonna go? Like that'd be crazy just to like start stealing invites, or I don't even know. Like,
well, he just shows up because he knows it's a paycheck. I mean,
hey, I can't fault the guy.
Nope.
If you can't beat him, it's on you anyway.
But I think that's a good enough note as any to end our pre-discussion on Milwaukee heading into this weekend. Did you have any other final notes you wanted to close out on before we close the show?
I don't think so. I think I'm excited to see how NA responds to 2 weeks off, essentially.
Sure.
I guess, Mexico's part of North America, but you know what I mean? Like the main circuit for North America. I guess Mexico is considered Latin America for Pokemon purposes, which always blows my mind, geography wise. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, like how much Joltik Box rises in popularity, how much our Chaladon falls off. I know Tank Terrapagos definitely will fall off compared to where it was in Atlanta. So it's interesting. Like the metagame, the top 2 decks have been the same. I think. Well, I guess after Atlanta, the top 2 decks have been the same. Like we've had Guardy and Dragapult pretty much at the top. Even if Dragapult, or even if Guardy's not necessarily the most played, it still feels like power level wise, it's in step with Dragapult in a lot of ways. And Raging Bolt is still popular and it's converting decently, enough to where it probably won't fall off significantly. Like people that were playing Raging Bolt won't be pressured into changing their decks necessarily. So I don't know. I think I like to see like that we're getting a couple new decks. I'm expecting that, like the meta will be pretty similar to what we've seen in Sevilla. But I don't know. Who knows? Like maybe somebody's been cooking up something. I haven't really been keeping up with anything like Hydreigon or anything crazy like that you brought up. So I don't know. What are you thinking? Is there are you predicting any shakeups or
I don't see any new stuff really coming out. I think one thing that I've played a little bit this week is Blissey, but not the like straight wall variant. Just it's Blissey as a card feels super flexible right now. Mostly because a lot of decks are Terra based and are giving you access to your Area Zero pretty easily or pretty reasonably. A lot of decks aren't running tons of stadiums, so when you do put it into play, it's easy to make it stick. And when you have the Terra in play, Blissey is a card that can facilitate Glass Trumpet very well.
Okay.
And Blissey naturally has a good matchup into Dragapult. So the big stumbling block has been trying to find a good answer to Gardevoir. And I don't think like the walls Blissey does not answer it very well. And so far, I still have not found a really good answer. I think one cute thing I haven't tested out yet at all, but an idea was to run a 1/1 Umbreon because you can put the EV down, Glass Trumpet to it, get the EV into the active because of its ability. It can evolve immediately into Umbreon, and then you can happy switch an energy up to it, attach to it, and then it does 320 and one hit KOs a Gardevoir. But the problem with that is that's a stage 1 line and it only kills one Gardevoir. It's not fully answering what your opponent's doing. And in that vein, something like Farigiraf is probably a better answer because it can one hit KO the Gardevoir while simultaneously sniping the Drifloon or Screamtail off the bench to try to clear things up from your opponent. And also leverages some other matchups a little bit better, like makes Raging Bolt easier to win because they don't have an answer to Farigiraf. I don't know. I think that Blissey's pretty cool. I think that it is positioned decently well, but if as long as Gardevoir's on top, it's not going to be able to win an event.
Yeah, it definitely has a Guardy problem holding it back. Tool Jammer, I could see somewhat effective, preventing that Drifloon from reaching to get the one shot.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. If you're able to like run them out of Artisans and then just kind of stabilize from there, but that can be tough. They can just kind of ignore the Blissey in the active or two shot it and be fine with that. Because you're not able to one shot essentially anything on their side.
Exactly, and you can't generate damage on your own board to be able to move it over to KO things with your Monkey Dory. So you just are in a losing position kind of from the jump, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and that kind of is what it is. Like every deck has at least one bad matchup, and that just coincidentally happens to be Blissey's. And it's not just a deck that you don't want to have a bad matchup going into an event right now.
Yeah, it definitely had its moment in the sun when we had like Dragapult at 26% play, and then Gardevoir wasn't as popular quite yet.
Yeah,
but I think Gardevoir will probably be in the top 3 this weekend for Milwaukee as far as played decks. I think that'd be my kind of big take. It'll push out anything else. Like if we're lumping all the Dragapult together, I think somehow Raging Bolt will still be the number 2 deck.
So you see Goldengo taking a big hit this week?
Yeah, I definitely do. I don't think we've seen Goldengo do quite as well the last few weeks. I know that Goldengo still has his believers, but and it had a huge showing in Atlanta, but like not a huge payoff for a lot of people. So I could see a world where we just move away from Goldengo and then because right now, I mean, Garda's won 3 regionals in a row. If somebody wants to ride that hot hand, makes a lot of sense. So
yeah, definitely can't fault him for it.
No,
but yeah. That'll I think that's going to close the show out for us. So once again, if you made it to the end, thank you for listening. We do appreciate each and every one of you and all the time that you put into listening to the show. And we would welcome any feedback you have in the comments, either on YouTube or on Spotify. And if you're hanging out on Spotify, if you could leave a like, leave a rating, leave a review, or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your podcasting platform is, we welcome any and all feedback you have. Any interaction you have helps other people find the show, makes it more visible, and allows us to continue to produce content for everybody. And if you haven't, go ahead and head over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Again, helps spread the show out so more people can see it, gives us a wider net, and helps people better understand the type of content that we're bringing to the table, and lets us kind of try to tailor it to the type of content that people want to see. So giving us that sort of feedback is also extremely welcome and helpful. Yeah. But like I said, that's going to do it for us this week here at the Battle Frontier. Thank you for hanging out with John and I all the way to the end, and we will see you guys on the other side of Milwaukee.
See you.